I always thought weddings were about love, not war. But when my sister-in-law Evelyn volunteered to help plan mine, I didn't realize I was walking into a setup. On the day I said I do, she said I take, stealing my entire gift table like it was her own. Guests handed her envelopes with my name on them, and she smiled like she earned them. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just watched. Because what she didn't know? The entire ballroom was wired. Every lie, every theft, every whisper. I had it all. And I wasn't just a bride, I was the trap. The sun hit just right that morning, warm but not glaring, like even the sky was trying to be on its best behavior. Everything felt cinematic. The white chairs, the soft floral arrangements, the smiling faces. I stood at the edge of the ballroom, veil pinned in place, bouquet trembling slightly in my hand. For a fleeting moment, I thought, maybe this is it. Maybe I finally belonged here. Evelyn, my sister-in-law, floated across the floor like royalty. Her burgundy gown shimmered with each step, her clipboard perfectly color-matched, her tone crisp as she directed caterers and coordinated florists. Everyone loved her. Guests praised her selflessness, her taste, her ability to take the stress off poor Samantha's shoulders. She smiled humbly, of course. She always knew how to look humble when she was winning. I smiled too. I had to. The gift table stood at the far right of the entrance, draped in ivory silk. Centered above it was a golden sign, with love to the Greer family. No mention of me. No Samantha and Daniel. No picture of us. Just the family name, his family name, like I was merely a new addition to the inventory. My name had vanished, even on the one day it should have been written everywhere. Guests began to arrive in waves, laughter and perfume trailing behind them. I watched them hug Evelyn before me, hand her sleek white envelopes, and nod as she said, "Oh yes, I'll make sure it gets to the family." Every time I heard that phrase, something sharp twisted in my chest. Still, I said nothing. Not yet. Instead, I walked through the garden where the vows would be exchanged, smiled at the violinist, nodded at my uncle. I kept the facade pristine, because I knew people only hear what fits the story they've already written, and today they'd been handed a script written by Evelyn. During the reception, as champagne glasses clinked and waiters floated past with hors d'oeuvres, I overheard a conversation between Evelyn and one of Daniel's aunts. "She's lucky to have you, Evelyn. You've done everything. I didn't even know Samantha had such a capable woman in the family." "Oh, she's just not really the planner type," Evelyn said sweetly. "She wanted a small wedding. Didn't care much about the details. You know how artists are." Artist. That's what Evelyn called me, because being an internal auditor at a corporate firm apparently didn't count as a real job in her world. But here's what Evelyn didn't know. She didn't know I had spent the past 6 months auditing more than company books. I had quietly mapped the family accounts, noted inconsistencies in financial transfers, and discreetly pulled vendor records under the guise of cross-checking invoices. I'd let Evelyn build this entire stage, let her center herself under the lights, adjust her crown, and take her bow. Because what's more devastating than exposing a thief? Letting them steal while they're being watched. Near the cake table, I caught sight of the young men in black polos. Staffers, apparently, stationed beside the gift table. They weren't hotel staff. I knew because I had personally reviewed the venue's personnel registry. Evelyn had brought them in herself, off books. One of them accepted an envelope from an elderly guest. He tucked it into a plain black bag. No ledger, no visible tracking system. Just a pile of cash disappearing, one envelope at a time. I turned and caught Evelyn's eye. She tilted her head, gave a mock-sweet smile. "You're doing great," she mouthed. And in that moment, I saw it. Not just the arrogance, but the strategy. Evelyn didn't want to ruin my wedding. She wanted to erase me from it. She wanted to prove, through subtle manipulation and financial sleight of hand, that I was unwanted, that no one celebrated me, that I was merely passing through the Greer legacy, not becoming part of it. She didn't just want to steal money, she wanted to steal belonging. But she made one mistake. She thought I was a bride. I wasn't. I was the reckoning. As I walked toward the sweetheart table, my hand brushed a tiny lapel mic sewn into the hem of my bouquet. I tapped it once. Just once. A silent signal to the tech team I'd hired under a different vendor name. They were upstairs, behind mirrored glass, watching the same feed I'd been building for weeks. Every camera in that ballroom was mine. Evelyn could keep smiling, for now. I excused myself halfway through the first dance. Guests whispered behind napkins, wondering if I was too overwhelmed, too emotional. Evelyn gave a sympathetic tilt of her head, lips pursed in faux concern, then seamlessly took my place on the dance floor, like she'd been waiting for the spotlight all along. Upstairs in the bridal suite, I didn't cry. I didn't even take off the dress. I just sat, bouquet still in my lap, laptop open on the vanity. The screen flickered to life with 4 camera feeds, one from the main ballroom, one focused tightly on the gift table, another by the back exit, and one hidden inside the decorative card box that Evelyn insisted on using instead of the standard hotel locked safe. I watched her. Every movement, every smile, every hand extended toward a guest offering cash or check. She accepted each envelope like she was royalty receiving tribute. No logging, no counting. Just silent transactions into a plain, black, zippered pouch. "Keep the flow steady," she whispered to one of her hired staff. "We'll do the tally after we clear out." Clear out to where? That's what I was tracking next. I opened the payment monitoring app I'd customized, linked discreetly to a prepaid merchant scanner hidden in a fake centerpiece on the gift table. Most guests had been nudged subtly into using Venmo or Zelle to send gifts electronically, under the guise of streamlining. That request came from Evelyn's wedding newsletter, of course, but I'd inserted a QR code of my own, and some of those guests, bless them, scanned mine. That's how I caught it. 4 transactions totaling over $12,000 were rerouted through a shell account, one I'd already flagged months ago during an audit at my firm. The name on the receiving end? Arcadia Hope Fund, a nonprofit Evelyn had joined as their new Director of Community Partnerships. The same nonprofit I helped investigate 6 months ago under a confidentiality clause. The same nonprofit whose CEO is currently under federal probe. The irony was surgical. I watched another envelope disappear into Evelyn's pouch, her fingers tightening for just a second before she returned to effortless grace. She wasn't just stealing wedding money. She was laundering it, using my wedding as cover. I took a long breath, fingers hovering over the keyboard. I could shut it all down right now, call out the scam in the middle of the reception, play the footage on a projector, drown Evelyn in humiliation. But that would be too easy and too short. I wanted more than a reaction. I wanted the structure she built to collapse in on itself. Downstairs, Daniel clinked his glass, raising a toast to the most beautiful bride anyone could hope for. He barely looked toward the suite. I wondered if he even noticed I'd left. Maybe he did. Maybe he didn't care. Either way, his voice sounded rehearsed, hollow. I tapped the microphone on my wrist. "Phase 2 is live," I whispered. From another room, a soft voice crackled back. "Recording clean. Transcription syncing. Evelyn just told a guest she's handling all gift distribution personally." Good. That was admissible. I switched back to the Arcadia Hope Fund's public filings. Dozens of inconsistencies. Vendor fees that didn't match inventory. Donor names that traced back to empty LLCs. I'd already handed this data to the federal agent overseeing the probe. What I hadn't told them, yet, was that a major laundering node had just reactivated. Today, at my wedding. I watched the ballroom fill with laughter and music while Evelyn circled the room like a queen. Her hands touched everything. Decorations, centerpieces, shoulders of unsuspecting guests. But she never touched the truth. She had no idea that while she played host, I was pulling the strings. I pulled up her resume from LinkedIn, the one she updated a week ago. She proudly listed project manager for exclusive events under her Arcadia role, citing high-trust family engagements as proof of her qualifications. This was her portfolio piece, her audition for real influence. She'd picked the wrong canvas. Because I'd been in this game longer than her, cleaner, smarter, legal. And I'd buried bigger thieves than Evelyn with just spreadsheets and subpoenas. She thought I was soft, emotional, new to the power plays of the Greer family, but Evelyn didn't know that last year I helped freeze the assets of a billionaire pharmaceutical exec before he could flee the country, or that I once traced $14 million through crypto tumblers across 3 shell accounts and got every cent returned to pensioners. She didn't know because I never told her. I never needed to. That's the thing about hidden weapons. You don't draw them to scare. You wait until the blade's at the throat and then whisper, smile. I looked down at the bouquet still in my lap, at the wire threaded through the satin ribbon, at the tiny lens no one would ever suspect. Evelyn's voice echoed through the feed again, careless, too confident. And I smiled, because she didn't know I'd already met the man she was laundering for, didn't know I'd already buried him. By the time the band switched from soft jazz to up-tempo pop, I'd already gathered enough to start building the report, but I didn't stop. Not yet. Evelyn was smart, I'll give her that. She didn't just skim off the top. She inflated the bottom. I opened a shared Google sheet, one Evelyn had invited me to months ago when wedding planning had first begun. She labeled it Greer Event Budget, Final Draft. I'd been a viewer, not an editor, but I downloaded every version. Under decorations, there were 3 floral vendors listed, each claiming the same $700-800 bouquet package. None matched the invoice from the actual florist I'd spoken to. Lighting and sound, charged twice through different shell names, both of which traced back to a single LLC registered in Delaware, with Evelyn listed as managing member. The icing, a custom-designed ice sculpture centerpiece that had never existed, billed at $4,500. I walked past the actual centerpiece minutes ago. It was glass, borrowed. She wasn't just rerouting money, she was rewriting reality. I copied the data into a folder titled The Greer Wedding Audit, encrypted it, and sent a backup to my private server. There would be no gaslighting, no misremembering. This time, I'd weaponized truth, and she wasn't working alone. In one of the videos, I saw Daniel's mother, Marjorie, lean in close to Evelyn during dinner. I boosted the audio. "Just make sure it doesn't come back to Daniel," she whispered. "He doesn't need to know how these things work yet. Let him focus on his role." His role? I froze the frame. Of course. Evelyn wasn't grooming herself for power. She was grooming Daniel, preparing him to step into a legacy, one she'd already curated, filtered, and monetized. And Marjorie? She wasn't oblivious, she was complicit. They weren't just stealing from me, they were rewriting the family's future, without me in it. I checked my watch. 8:27 p.m. Right on cue, a tall man in a charcoal suit stepped into the reception. No one noticed him. He looked like any other polished guest, but his name was Ellis Monroe, litigator, expert in financial crimes, and conveniently my +1 for the evening. He made his rounds slowly, quietly, sat beside Marjorie during dessert, asked questions, harmless ones, complimented Evelyn on her organizational skills, let her talk, and she did. About costs, about pressure, about how some people just didn't understand the burden of maintaining family reputation. She was building my case for me, word by word. The microphone Ellis wore clipped inside his cufflink recorded everything. Later, he would hand me the file. I wouldn't need to embellish. All I had to do was press play. I descended the staircase into the main hall, scanning for Evelyn. She was standing beneath the chandelier, laughing too loudly, surrounded by people who believed they were in the presence of a savior. She saw me, and something flickered. Not fear, not yet, but doubt. She made her way over, weaving through guests, her posture tight. "You've been hiding," she said, teeth clenched behind her smile. "Just needed a moment," I replied calmly. "It's been enlightening." Her eyes narrowed. "Cut the cryptic. What are you doing?" "You'll find out in the morning." Her lips twitched. "If you're trying to pull something dramatic, Samantha, remember who they'll believe. I've been here longer. I've earned their trust. And I've recorded their trust being misplaced." She paled slightly but recovered. "Careful," she hissed. "Defamation is still a crime." "So is wire fraud." I stepped past her. The orchestra struck up a celebratory waltz. Glasses clinked. The world kept turning. But Evelyn didn't. She followed me toward the center of the room, voice raised now. "You think you're better than us? Smarter? Because you work with spreadsheets. You're just a pretty girl with a boring job, marrying up and acting like it's a promotion." The room quieted. I turned around. Daniel stood at the bar, frozen, drink halfway to his mouth. Marjorie's smile faltered. Guests shifted uncomfortably, but Evelyn didn't stop. "Everyone knows you're cold, methodical. That's why no one trusted you with the wedding. You killed joy, Samantha." And then I said nothing, just looked at her, calm, measured, collected. Because every word she screamed now, every insult she spit was fuel, not just for me, but for everyone watching. Evelyn's control was unraveling. I didn't need to drag her down. She was doing that herself. And tomorrow, she would find her own voice transcribed, her schemes documented, her allies exposed. I didn't need vengeance. I had evidence. 2 weeks after the wedding, I sent out handwritten invitations. Not emails, not texts. Each envelope was thick, engraved with gold trim, addressed in blue ink. "Afternoon tea and gratitude, a private gathering for those who made our day unforgettable." Every guest who had handed Evelyn an envelope, every vendor who'd been paid twice, every friend who had whispered, "I'm not sure she gave it to you." I booked a quiet garden terrace at a historic inn on the outskirts of town. Classical piano hummed in the background. No press, no pomp, just a smile, a welcome, and a clipboard. "Before we begin," I said, handing out velvet-lined cards, "I'd love if each of you could help us complete our keepsake ledger. Just note what you gifted on the day, if you remember, so we can treasure it properly." They obliged, some laughing, others delighted at the personal touch. A few raised brows, remembering the confusion at the gift table, but none objected. By the end of the hour, I had 73 entries and 73 mismatches. Evelyn's original report, filed under Greer Family Event Summary, listed just 21 gift entries, most marked as verbal best wishes or no physical item given. Several large cash donations were missing entirely. The difference? Just under $70,000. The ledger was printed, signed, and time-stamped by each guest. That alone would have been enough, but I never liked stopping at enough. As the tea concluded, I handed each guest a delicate thank you box, pale ivory with a satin ribbon. Inside was a personalized thank you note and a small black USB drive. They asked no questions, but they would, because on that drive was a curated, tightly edited 90-second video. Evelyn smiling, accepting envelopes, Evelyn folding them into her bag, Evelyn saying, "We'll handle it, it's family business." No voiceover, no accusations, just facts. That night, the video was forwarded 62 times. The next morning, Evelyn was removed from the Arcadia Hope Fund's website. Her access credentials were revoked, her position under review. Within 48 hours, the board issued a statement. Arcadia does not tolerate financial misconduct. An internal audit is underway. But they were too late, because I'd already sent the full financial dossier, compiled, labeled, cross-referenced, to a contact at the IRS, quietly, cleanly. I also delivered one printed copy, bound in navy leather, to Evelyn's mother's doorstep. It arrived with a card that read, "You wanted legacy. This is yours." Marjorie Greer, matriarch of the family, was called into a private hearing with the family trust's legal committee. The outcome: restitution. Every undocumented withdrawal, every discretionary grant Evelyn had helped push through, was frozen, and Marjorie, ordered to repay over $140,000 or risk legal proceedings that could expose her own dealings from years past. I never raised my voice, never filed a lawsuit. I didn't have to, because justice, when designed properly, doesn't knock. It knocks down. Daniel called me 3 times, left one voicemail. You didn't have to go this far. But he was wrong. I didn't go far. I just didn't stop short like the women before me had. I sat on the porch of my brownstone the following weekend, sipping coffee when the first article dropped. Charity under fire, internal corruption at Arcadia. Then came the second. Family finances in question, Greer Trust under investigation. By Monday, Evelyn's face was blurred on national TV, but people recognized the dress, the venue, the day. She didn't respond to reporters. She couldn't, because she wasn't fighting a rumor. She was drowning in receipts. And the best part? I hadn't said a word in public. I didn't need to. Every message was delivered silently, precisely, like the clicks of a domino trail. Evelyn tried to call once. I let it ring. She sent a message. You destroyed everything. No, I just revealed what was already there. The destruction wasn't mine. It was hers. The only thing I did was set the match beside the gasoline and walk away before she struck it herself. For every email that praised me, there was another that damned me. You're incredible. Thank you for showing us what strength looks like. You could have handled this privately. You embarrassed an entire family. Some called me a whistleblower. Others called me a traitor. Feminist blogs lauded my silent revolution, while conservative opinion pieces painted me as a vengeful opportunist who destroyed her own wedding for clout. I read them all. Then I turned off the phone. Fame was never the goal. Neither was revenge. All I wanted was the truth to stand on its own legs, for once. Daniel, however, didn't see it that way. He arrived 3 days after the Arcadia news broke, still dressed like the husband he hadn't been. He didn't knock, just let himself in with the key he still had, as if the world hadn't split between us. You blindsided me, he said, standing in the living room, arms crossed. If you knew something this big was happening, why didn't you tell me sooner? I didn't look at him. You're upset I didn't warn you about your own sister? He shifted, guilt surfacing for half a second before retreating. That's not what I said. But it's what you meant. I walked to the kitchen and poured tea into the cup I no longer offered him. You wanted me to stay quiet, to keep the water calm until the last toast was done. But I'm not a decoration, Daniel. I'm not a Greer by blood, and apparently not one by trust either. He looked down. It wasn't about trust. It was timing. I just didn't think it would escalate like this. I reached for the drawer beside me, pulled out a flash drive, and tossed it gently onto the table. Play it, I said. He hesitated, picked it up, plugged it into his phone, and there it was. His voice clear as glass from 3 weeks before the wedding, in the back room of the estate, whispering to Evelyn, "Just keep it smooth. She won't notice. She's got too much on her plate. She doesn't look at the family finances, not really, just smile and let her paint the invitations or whatever. She doesn't know what we're doing." When it ended, he didn't move. For 3 seconds, the room went still, breathless, and in those 3 seconds, I felt the invisible rope snap, that thin fraying line between husband and man who let it happen, between ally and coward. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just looked at him, as if seeing him for the very first time. And when he finally met my eyes, I think he knew. "I didn't want to lose you," he said, almost a whisper. "You lost me the moment you stood beside her instead of in front of me." He left that night. I changed the locks the next morning, but the silence that followed wasn't peace. It was the beginning of a new kind of war. Because while Evelyn was buried under the weight of her own lies, something larger was rising from the ashes. A week after the story broke, I received a message from an unknown sender. No name, just a subject line. "We've seen your work. Let's talk." It was followed by a phone call from a woman with a clipped, measured voice. "Ms. Greer, Samantha, we'd like to invite you into a task force. Discreet federal level. You've uncovered a vein of something much deeper than family drama." I sat still. How deep? There's a coordinated network of fraudulent charitable fronts across 3 states. Evelyn's group is just one. But the financial patterns in your report match anomalies we've seen elsewhere. Clean data, rare intuition. We need that. I thought of Evelyn, of how precise she'd been, of how convinced she was that she was untouchable, and I thought of how easy it had been to connect her to a larger rot, one that had been festering, feeding on loopholes and trust. All I'd done was follow the numbers, but the numbers didn't stop with her. They led to boardrooms, to politicians, to people who wore righteousness like a tailored coat, polished on the outside, hollow within. I accepted the offer, not because I wanted to be a hero, but because I couldn't unsee what I now knew existed. I once thought Evelyn was the enemy, that this story would end with her fall. But she was never the end. She was the door, and I had just stepped through it. The morning my face appeared on the cover of Forbes Women, I deleted the article before finishing the first paragraph. Not because I was ashamed, but because I was finished with it. The spotlight had lingered longer than I ever intended. Interview requests, speaking engagements, round tables. Producers pitched documentaries, ghostwriters offered book deals. Harvard reached out, first with a lecture invitation, then with a teaching offer, and I said yes to only one. I didn't want to be known as the woman who exposed her family. I wanted to be remembered, quietly, as the woman who helped others see the trap before they stepped into it. So I moved to a small town on the edge of nowhere. Crisp air, real coffee, and silence that felt earned. I accepted the role of adjunct professor in financial integrity and forensic auditing at Harvard Business School. Twice a week, I'd take the train into the city, teach young minds how to trace deceit through data, then return home where no one called me anything but Sam. And I wrote. The memoir came slowly, not because the memories were painful. They weren't. They were precise, too precise. Every betrayal, every hidden transfer, every time someone underestimated me. I remembered all of it. False Paradise, I titled it, not as a warning, as a mirror. Because for many, marriage isn't the start of something sacred. It's the beginning of erosion, slow, quiet, wrapped in ribbon and silence. I began the first chapter with one sentence. I was the bride, yes, but I was also the trap. The manuscript traveled fast, not to publishers first, but to survivors, friends of friends, women who had lived their own versions of Evelyn, of Daniel, of families who loved the idea of them, but never the reality. One message stood out. A girl in Utah. I read the part where you said your silence was the sharpest blade. I was going to marry someone who made me feel like a temporary guest in my own life. Your story saved me from becoming someone else's footnote. I didn't reply. I just saved her message in a folder titled Worth It. With time, my platform changed. I stopped giving interviews and started giving knowledge. I launched an online course, Financial Autonomy and Relationships. It wasn't flashy. No ads, no drama. Just practical truth, wrapped in emotional clarity. Enrollment grew. Women, men, couples, even financial advisors. Each class began the same way. Love without leverage is a gamble. Let's stack your odds. By year 2, I'd built a quiet community, one that didn't worship me, but walked with me. Then one day, as I reviewed a new enrollment list, a name stopped me. Claire Halston. It was nothing special, just a name, But the eyes in the profile photo, dark brown, just a little too composed, told me everything. I zoomed in. The jawline had softened. The makeup was muted, but the posture was identical. It was Evelyn. She'd been out for 3 months. No media, no noise, just vanished. And now she was here. I didn't reach out. I didn't block her. I just marked the enrollment as active. The first assignment was a personal essay. Tell me about the first time you saw a red flag and ignored it. She submitted hers 5 days early. I read it at night, curled up by the fireplace. The writing was sharp, self-aware, full of misdirection. She talked about trust, about power, about the masks people wear. She never used her real name, never mentioned prison. But she ended with one sentence that made my skin still. I used to think the smartest woman in the room was the one speaking. Now I know it's the one watching. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I closed it. And for the first time in years, I felt no anger, no victory, just readiness. Because redemption isn't always a comeback. Sometimes it's a test. And this time, I'm the one writing the questions.